In part 1 of C6 Cam Swap, other parts to replace while we're in there, we covered 3 other components that must be replaced when upgrading from the stock LS cam to a performance aftermarket camshaft. Valve springs, valve seals, and push rods of course all made the list, and we really should upgrade the stock rocker arm trunnions as a preemptive measure to prevent their little needle bearings from falling out and wandering around the engine, causing all kinds of collateral damage in the event the stock rocker arm bearings fail. I asked you guys for help in identifying worthy aftermarket trunnion kits for my LS2, and you guys came through. I'd have to say that the most mentioned options were probably the ones from CHE. That having been said, after considerable thought, I've decided to go with version 2 Brian Tooley Racing trunnion kits because they're a little bit cheaper and, in my opinion, they're more than adequate for my relatively mild valve train in my LS2. Let's move on to the next component I probably should consider replacing when upgrading my LS2's camshaft, and that is the vibration damper. Vibration damper is what most people refer to as the harmonic balancer, but since our LS engines are technically internally balanced, it's really not a harmonic balancer, it really is a vibration damper. As you may know, stock GM vibration dampers are not known for their longevity. In fact, they're one of the most commonly replaced items on C5 and C6 Corvettes. What typically happens is that the outer ring tends to separate from the inner hub sooner than most people would expect, and if the telltale signs of a chirping belt or a wobbling harmonic balancer are ignored, the outer ring will start sliding backwards off the hub and start grinding a hole into the timing cover, or if it slides forward, it can actually become a projectile under the hood, and neither one of these options is desirable. So my plan is to remove the vibration damper and carefully inspect it, and unless it looks like it's been replaced in the last few years and it's not of 2006 vintage, I'll likely replace it. Which particular vibration damper might I go with? Well, I recently did an entire video on this subject, and there's a link to it right up here if you want to dig into that in more detail. The next item on the replace or not list is the water pump, and like most items on our list, conventional wisdom says to replace it while you're in there. Now, water pumps for the LS2 cost over $200, and since water pumps typically give plenty of notice before experiencing any kind of catastrophic failure,
much more loose than I thought it would be. So yeah, that just might be a problem.
I'm simply going to remove the water pump from the LS2, inspect it carefully for any signs of past leaks, and then spin it to make sure it spins freely and quietly, and if it passes both of those tests, it's getting bolted right back in. Belts, pulleys, and tensioners, more of the same here. My belt system currently is quiet and it's not giving me any signs of trouble, so I'm simply going to inspect everything carefully. And what I mean by that is I'll be looking at the belt, looking for any sort of cracks or deterioration, and I'll spin all of the pulleys, making sure they're quiet and smooth as they should be. Timing chain, timing gears, and dampener. My LS2 engine has over 100,000 miles on it, and I believe all of the timing components are original. This means there's almost certainly a material amount of wear on the timing chain gears, and more importantly on the timing chain itself, which makes it longer and consequently looser. Therefore, I am planning to replace all of the timing chain components unless, of course, the timing chain surprises me and it turns out to be relatively snug, and in that unlikely scenario, I might possibly reuse it. When replacing the timing chain and sprockets, once again, there are quite a few different options which can be a bit overwhelming. For a relatively mild cam like the one I've selected, I'll likely go with a single roller timing set like this one from Cloy's, and of course, a new dampener. Before proceeding and placing that order, I'll have to make note of how many poles are on my existing camshaft gear and make sure that the timing set that I order has the same number of poles, or the engine will not be happy. Being as how there are so many different options, I'm curious, and I would appreciate it if you'd let us know in the comments what your preferred timing chain set is for mild LS builds, and specifically why it's your preference. Next on the list of possible items to replace are the LS2's roller lifters. Back in the old days when small block Chevys came with flat tappet camshafts, you absolutely positively had to change the lifters anytime you swapped in a new camshaft, And this is because of the way that the camshaft lobes and the lifter faces would actually wear together. In modern roller cam engines, each lifter has a little wheel mounted at one end that rolls across the face of the cam lobe as it turns, which greatly reduces friction and wear. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, my LS2 engine has over 100,000 miles on it, so I could be forgiven for being a little bit cautious, yanking the heads and replacing all of the roller lifters with new ones. However, I'm going to roll the dice just a little bit and potentially reuse the existing ones. There are a lot of neglected LS motors out there in Tahoes and Silverados, and those engines routinely go over 200,000 miles without even breaking a sweat.
And why don't you tell everybody how many miles is on this?
I just getting ready to turn 300,000 on it.
So 300,000 miles on a 2003 truck.
And I think it's fair to say that most Corvette guys put less miles on their engine each driving season, and they also change their oil at much shorter oil change intervals. With all of those assumptions in mind, I will be pulling my LS2 camshaft and inspecting it super closely for any signs of pitting or any other blemishes, and if it looks to be in really good shape, I'll be reusing it. If I see anything of concern on even one cam lobe, I'll be yanking both heads and replacing all 16 lifters. Next up, we'll be talking about the heart of the engine, and that is, of course, the oil pump. The oil pump is a critical component, and fortunately we have a test that will tell us the general condition of the oiling system, including the oil pump. That test is simply this: what is the engine's oil pressure in pounds per square inch when the engine is at idle at full operating temperature with relatively fresh 5W30 engine oil? In a couple of different General Motors documents, it says 6 pounds per square inch when the engine is hot is sufficient at idle, but I wouldn't settle for that, and I doubt you would either. I want to see something closer to at least 20 pounds per square inch at idle, and fortunately I already tested the C6 this past summer, and I have 31 pounds per square inch at full operating temperature at 650 RPMs, so I'll be reusing my existing oil pump. There are a few more incidental items that I'm going to need, things like a timing cover gasket, front crank seal, engine and oil coolant, and perhaps a thermostat. Oh, and you're going to need a little bit of camshaft lube because you never want to stick your bump stick in without lubricating it first. Now, some of you out there probably think I should just replace everything, and yet others may want to reuse a couple items that I intend to toss in the garbage, and that's okay. Of course, there's a little bit of risk when reusing old parts, but keep in mind there is some risk as well when buying new parts. They could be made to the wrong tolerance, or perhaps there's a hidden defect that causes them to fail prematurely. And keep in mind, vendors and manufacturers all have a financial interest in selling you parts, and no one has a financial interest in trying to talk you out of parts, so few do. That's going to do it for part 2, C6 cam swap, other parts to replace while you're in there. If you learned anything from this video, tap that thumbs up so YouTube knows to share it with the Corvette community. Consider subscribing so you don't miss the next C6 video where I finally break the tools out and start the actual cam swap. And most of all, thanks for watching.